From TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jason Kitamura, and this is Tech and Cannabis. I talk with game changers in the tech community to gain valuable insights into the future of the fast-paced cannabis industry. Today, I'm joined by Christina DiArcangelo of Affinity Biopartners. With her extensive experience and expertise, she has developed multiple products to better serve patients with cannabis. From AI-powered bots to wearable monitors and custom CBD patches based on your body's deficiencies, Christina is positioned to change the industry not only by helping people in need, but by using this data to validate the pharmaceutical benefits of cannabis. We also talk about how she got started, what the industry is up against, and how she is saving the world in 4 days. I would like to thank Christina DiArcangelo for coming on to the show. She's with Affinity Biopartners. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Yeah, so you have a very extensive resume when it comes to research and cannabis. I guess for the listeners out there who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you so much. Lately I've been referring to myself as a unicorn because, and it's not because I'm trying to be cocky. It's just like, wow, my career started off doing business, legal, finance. I have a degree in business as well as paralegal. And then I have another degree in business and organizational management. So I hold 3 degrees. I'm a certified paralegal, which means I could actually practice law in Florida if I chose to do so. So I started off my career very early at 19 years old, believe it or not. I finished with my first set of degrees and went in to be a bankruptcy litigation paralegal. Then I did wills, estates, and trusts, then mergers and acquisitions, and happened to be working in a building where there was a clinical research organization, which is what I now currently own through Affinity Biopartners. That's what that company is. And I interviewed, and they gave me the job. I didn't know really anything about biotech or pharmaceuticals or negotiating. I was negotiating contracts on behalf of the CRO against the sponsor companies, so like companies like Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, et cetera. And basically just fell into this industry through that, the fact that someone took a chance on me just because of the inherent skills I had on the legal and business side. And then with that, it rolled into, going from company to company. Johnson & Johnson was my second job in the industry, very young. So, I started at 19. So I wasn't a paralegal that long. And then I jumped into the biotech industry, feet first kind of, but really head first. And I've stuck with it. And so throughout my career, I've worked on 25 FDA approved drugs. I've worked for a multitude of small, mid-sized, large biotech, pharma, and then device companies when I started my first CRO in 2010 on the West Coast. And from there, when I started my first CRO, which was called Armonia Clinical Research for Harmony, harmonizing clinical research. I'm Italian, so hence the reason why I chose Armonia as the headlining name for the front end of my company. My whole approach was to basically try to harmonize relationships in an outsourcing structure. At 30, I was one of the youngest heads of sourcing and procurement in the entire industry at 30. I was responsible for all of FibroGen's outsourcing and procurement activities from clinical development to bioanalytical. So you can see that I built up my toolbox along the way and learned how to source out all these various issues and areas, including electronic data capture, electronic patient reported outcomes, and all the technology pieces that we needed. And I started my first CRO. And with that, I basically had some branding issues. People kept calling it ammonia, like the cleaning agent. So it was like a problem, right? So we tried to rebrand, and it just wasn't getting anywhere, right? Everybody was calling so I decided I had to change the company name. So in 2014, I launched Affinity Biopartners, which you can see we went from Armonia Clinical Research to Affinity Biopartners. So a completely different look and feel. We added strategic governance, and really then in 2014 was kind of like what we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do from a technology standpoint. Because in a CRO standpoint, you have the tendency of they're not good at everything they do, a clinical research organization, and a lot of times they license their technology out. So my sourcing background, I was an expert then at all these pieces of technology because I had to source it all of it, over my
Wow.
career. So when it came time to getting into building out a tech platform, now, in full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a programmer, I'm none of those things. I just happen to understand the data components I need to collect based on all the years that I've been supporting clinical research studies, right? And designing trials. So 2014 was when Affinity Biopartners came alive. 2015 is when I launched my nonprofit called Affinity Patient Advocacy, which is a nonprofit firm that advocates for patients at no cost. The reason why I did that was because my father passed away that year from diagnosis to death. It was less than 2 months with stage 4 liver, lung, and stomach cancers. He had battled cancer for 22 years. His first clip commenced when he was 40, and he had to have his prostate removed. At the time that he had his prostate removed, a bit of the tumor was in his stomach. And so for 22 years, he fought this battle. I came back from California in 2010 because I was in San Francisco, because he had come out of remission again. We had already removed part of his stomach. He had been in multiple clinical trials, and we thought that this might be it, that there's a possibility he wasn't going to make it. So owning a CRO, I was able to come back. So I came back to the Philadelphia area. So I'm glad I did, because you fast forward to 2015 after my son was born and my dad passed. And so that was like my call to action. And the reason why I'm saying all this is because when I get into the nut and bolts of the tech side, which is what your viewers and audience wants to hear, I want people to understand the background that I have and why I'm so passionate about technology and the data collection aspect, and how I want to ensure that patients now have a voice, because right now patients don't, right? The doctors tell you what to do. None of the doctors are talking. No one knows your chart. And I see all this through the nonprofit, right? Affinity Patient Advocacy. Because when you're doing research, you don't know the people. You can't because of HIPAA, right? So I have no idea. I'm designing studies based on therapeutic areas, based on disease states, and looking for secondary endpoints that this drug might help, right, to help these patients. That's a different part of my brain. Then when I'm in the patient advocacy side, now I'm dealing with doctors, pharmacies, insurance companies, hospice, a whole gamut of people. And sometimes even lawyers are involved because of malpractice issues, or say a tenant is being kicked out of their home. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So I started that in 15. So it's been alive for 6 years. We're coming up on our 6-year anniversary. We're going to have a very big party in October. That's when my dad had passed away. October 13th, 2015 was when he passed. And so here we're going to do a virtual event because we're still worried about COVID and patients, because we work with patients directly and they're all over the United States. We want to make sure we have an event for them that supports them. So that's going to be coming up in October. So then I got involved in medical cannabis and CBD research because of the nonprofit. I was a keynote speaker at Relay for Life, where I shared my experience and why I started my nonprofit based on advocating for my dad. And during that process, I just did my job, right? I connected the dots. I did the best I could with what I know. I've worked on tons of oncology drugs throughout my lifetime in my career, but I didn't think about the fact that he was going to die. I knew he was going to die, but I wasn't thinking about the stopgap that was going to happen. So when he died, then it was like, oh my gosh, he's gone. Now he's gone. And I've got to learn to live my life without him. And we had a big relationship. He was my number one in my life. And I'm lucky that I have a son who can now carry forward our legacies, my legacy and my father's legacy, because he was the people's people. He was a laborer. I grew up blue collar, very political. He was a Teamster. He worked for the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. I work with the Teamsters now because of my dad. which is amazing. But what happened was when I delivered my keynote, somebody somehow figured out who I was and contacted me from a local grow out in the West Coast and asked me to turn their grow into a certified grow facility that could be biotech backed. So the certain regulations and things that you have to line up, I know how to do that. I can't do it. I can source the right people to do it, and I can follow it through from a project management standpoint. And I'd been reading things about medical cannabis and CBD. The time that my dad died, we didn't have a program in Pennsylvania. So he died without being able to take legally cannabis, which I saw him suffer firsthand, And then fast forward 3 years later, I'm helping his oldest brother die, not because of cancer, but all kinds of other issues. He didn't have a medical card. I helped him get one because in 18 we had a program in Pennsylvania, and the card came a day after he died. So I've watched two people, in my family die without being able to utilize cannabis. So when this grower came in contact with me, I said, sure, let's see what we can do. I've been watching the research. I see, some things that are being published. I think there's potential here, and I can take all of my learned lessons from biotech failures and wins and bring it over. And so that's what I did. So that's how I got into medical cannabis and CBD. So then I started working with global pharma companies because I talk their talk. I know how to talk with them and explain what I need to do to whatever it is, and they're not pushing back, because in the beginning, people didn't want me in this space, right? Especially the recreational side, because I'm a medical cannabis, proponent, right? I'm not, I can only help in the medical cannabis side. I'm not a recreational backer. As far as I'm concerned, that's over the counter, like Tylenol in my mind, in the pharmaceutical, scale of things. So I started working in that side through Affinity Bio Partners. But then I got a group of people together that I was lucky to be part of, where we developed the first voice activated Cannabot. And that's AI technology that works off of Google and Alexa. And you can speak to the Cannabot back and forth. It's firing. Sorry, it's firing up right now. I don't know if you heard it come on, but it was coming on because obviously it sits in my office. But anyway, what happens is it helps patients from an educational standpoint, but I also built in the electronic patient reported outcome side. So when I'm doing clinical research or I have a client that wants to use the bot in that way, they're able to. So we split out our technology. We have the doctor bot, which is for traditional pharma, because you can't deploy a bot called Cannabot in the traditional side. I still split my sides between traditional and medical cannabis. So not so much on the traditional side anymore, except for I was working on the pandemic. I actually was working on 2 treatments for COVID. So anyway, back to the cannabis. We have the Cannabot. And so since then, that was in 2018, we built that bad boy. I then joined Spectral, which is Spectral Analytics Precision Telemonitoring. So we have a holding company called Spectral Analytics. I am the chief R&D officer for the holding company. We spun out another company called Spectral Analytics Precision Telemonitoring. And this is the fun part. This is this really encapsulates what I've been doing throughout my career when I talk about this, because now you're going to see that those little crumbs along the way that I was putting out on the road will now line up to a piece of bread with Spectral. And basically what happens is we've built out a telemonitoring platform that will provide electronic data capture and electronic patient reported outcomes for sponsor companies that want to do clinical trials, or say you're a CBD brand and you want to ascertain additional data regarding your products. This is the best way to do it, because we can design electronic patient reported outcomes, ePro studies for you, and then publish a white paper based on data that's coming into our system that's validated. It's not SurveyMonkey, it's not Excel, it's an actual tool that the FDA recognizes. Because remember, putting on that hat, that's where it came from. Now, I'm not programming. I have a whole team of developers behind me. but I'm telling them what needs to happen when. So that's a portion of Spectral. The other thing that we have is that we're able to capture data with central labs. So I will be able to, and I've already negotiated this with our central lab provider, just like we do in traditional pharma, to have kits deployed for efficacy and safety. So we will be looking at creatinine levels, things like that that are important. We know that cannabis titrates and processes through the liver, right? Is anybody looking at the bilirubin levels? Probably not. I haven't been seeing any data. And trust me, I read every day what's going on, but no one's doing it. So while everyone was complaining about COVID, we were working in the COVID paradigm with the White House and everything else, but we were building the infrastructure for Spectral that we have today. So with that said, we have all the lab processing that we can do, as well as cortisol testing, which is important because if you don't know what your cortisol levels are, you can't process a vitamin D pill. Seriously, you might as well just take it and throw it in the toilet because it's not going to be absorbed by your body because your cortisol levels, for people who are listening and don't understand what that means, that's your fight or flight mode. So when you're terrorized, something happens, your stress levels go up, right? When they go up, what happens? You panic. So if you've taken something, whether it's CBD, whatever it is that you took, again, even back to your vitamins, if your stress levels are perpetually high, you will never gather any of the components of what you're taking. And traditional medicine practices, they do not check for cortisol. Have you ever gone to the doctor and they said, let's check your cortisol
Absolutely
levels?
Not. Right.
No. So, I mean, this isn't rocket science, folks. It's a blood tube. We do a blood draw where we check everything else and we pull that at the same time. But then what's really exciting is we are going to be doing endocannabinoid testing. So right now, people take cannabis and CBD and CBG and CBN and CBC and all the acronyms, right? Everybody's taking all kinds of things, the terps. But do you really know what you're deficient in as a patient? I'm a patient. In 2018, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and Hashimoto. I had been sick leading up to that the year prior, and before that, I was fine. However, when I got these two indications, most people in my position would have gone to traditional pharma, right? Because I grew up there. That's where I came from. But because I was already in the research space with medical cannabis and CBD, I rolled the dice. I'm not saying people should do this, but I could because I have the ability to do so. And I started taking CBD and CBN and CBG when I first got sick, before I knew about the fibro. And so that was helping with my thyroid, etc. Then later on, the pain kept getting worse, and I had to get a medical card in Pennsylvania so I could get THC, and I take Rick Simpson oil at night. But again, I don't know if I'm deficient in THC or if I'm deficient in this, or I don't know. I'm going on the assumption and I'm watching how I feel when I do certain things. And that's how I change my med stream. But if we do the testing, then I can tell you, Jason, what you're deprived of, what I don't have, what my son doesn't have, because he has ADHD and he has 6 other mental health developmental disorders. So he's obviously a CBD patient at 8 years old. We formulated some patches for him through Spectral for ADHD, a transdermal patch. So that is part of what we're doing. Then I just spilled the beans about the transdermal patches, right? So we have, the traditional ones everybody has, full, broad, again, not to be rude, but that's over the counter. They're not formulated. You know what I mean? Like there's no science behind it. It's like, okay, we have our source for our CBD, etc. But when the fun begins for us is when we start formulating for indication purposes. So we already formulated an ADHD patch. We've had about 15 pediatrics that have participated in that study. So we'll be issuing a white paper, collected the data through the ePro, through Spectral, so that we can be able to run our report and understand if the stuff's working or not, right? Again, no Excel, no tracker, no Survey Monkey.
What actual kind of data are you receiving from the ePro? Like what comes in that?
It's based on the
Hmm.
questionnaires that we develop. So being a veteran in the industry for as long as I have, I know what questions I need to ask these patients. Plus, I know validated questionnaires that need to be programmed into the ePro. So, an example of that is HADS. That's an anxiety questionnaire that is owned by MAPI. So, that's the company that owns it. So, what happens is you license to use their questionnaire, and then my programming team programs it into the ePro and deploys it to the patients. And that's how the data is captured. What's important to know, though, is that if you do not license these questionnaires from the licensee holder, like MAPI, and you use it, you use the data that you procured using their questionnaire without their permission and your payment, because you have to pay to play, you can't use that data in your white paper
Got it.
and you can be sued. So you have to license. This is
Yeah.
where you see how like all the breadcrumbs start coming in. These are all things I learned. Hey, listen, I gave up a lot of my personal life to be where I am professionally today. I'm only 44 years old, and I've done all these things, in 24 years of my life.
You're very busy.
Yeah, I am. I'm extremely busy. And then the other piece that the viewers are going to want to know is the watch, right?
Yeah.
So we know that there's all these watches. Garmin's, I have the Apple, there's all these things. Fitbit's not a watch, but it's a device, all the same kind of genre. What we're doing is we're building out a proprietary watch that we can give to patients. So that means that the patient can wear this watch. We have the bots behind here, right?
Hmm.
They fire up when we need them to, if we want them to talk to people or we want it to be a chat bot, depends on what we're doing and with whom. But what happens with the watch when it's finally programmed and on the portal is that we will measure their blood pressure, their heart rate, noise levels, sleep, all the things that are important to a patient when they're ill, right? Like looking at their oxygen levels are important, especially if they're a pulmonary patient, right?
Right.
If they're even asthma, that's important to know what the heck's happening. I have a lot of bad allergies, so that's why I'm saying this is, I had an asthma attack in Miami last week when I was on set, filming 4 days to save the world, where we met in Miami and there were a team of people, of entrepreneurs. I was the only one that was a clinical researcher tech, person like I am, but there was a researcher on the team, like a scientist, attorney, 2 MDs, and we had the pandemic, and we developed a business model in 4 days on TV. They were filming us, which in itself is stressful because you're gotta, and I'm competitive, clearly, right? I want to win. I'm part of a team. I want to make sure we win. I'm going to do what I need to. And then he threw a young student in who had just graduated from high school, who had to pitch our business idea in 2 minutes to investors.
Wow.
We were one of the winning teams. So now I'll be part of this endeavor in this company as one of the chiefs there, chief R&D officer. And I'll be able to work with, hopefully, my spectral side and team to collect all the data, because it'll be pandemic related, which, between you and I, will be an emergency use application for a device.
That's amazing. Where do we watch this? How do we
Oh yeah,
watch
so
the
it's
show?
coming out Earth Day next year, and it'll be on Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, Roku, all the syndicates
What's it
that
called?
pick up documentaries. It's How to Save the World in 4 Days.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it was pretty cool. I've never been on a film site like that before, other than for interviews. I've never been on TV before. So it was kind of interesting, to be in a completely different element for myself. And then I had to adapt to a group of people I've never met before, from all different walks and all different, races and genders. Plus there were the younger generation that were on the team as well. And so you're all coming together in a melting pot and you're trying to create magic. And we created it, but I was so tired when I got back on the plane to come home. Like I couldn't wait to get back to my kid,
Well, I mean, I'm glad you guys are going to save the world in 4 days. That's pretty awesome. But No,
It's pretty
it's
awesome.
incredible. I mean, let's backtrack a little bit too. So, I mean, that was a lot of stuff that you're doing. Uh, I know for the consumer, I mean, we have the bots, and essentially, I guess the bots are just something out there that you could just ask questions to find out more about where, that information is kind of lacking just in standard medical practice. So it's for anybody who wants to start utilizing CBD and cannabis and get a little more info. Correct?
That is
Uh,
correct. But then there's the research component
right.
to it, which is I can turn it on to start finding patients for recruitment purposes, right?
Right.
So say you're trying to enroll a tough indication. There's not a lot of people out there. You're looking for a pink panda bear in New Jersey. It doesn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to find these people? This bot with the back end, we have back end bots behind it that can go and locate people through AI. Once they locate people, the pretty boy bot, which is the Cannabot or the doctor bot,
Right.
comes out in front of the person and says, hello, have you been, if it's chat, it'll be typing to them. Have you been diagnosed with blah, blah, blah? Yes or no? You say yes. The bot comes back on and says, asks you more questions and tees you up to get enrolled in a clinical study.
Gotcha.
So the bot is amazing because the bot can also fire messages to the watch. So say you're in a panic state,
It's a
right?
24/7 recruiter, basically. Yeah.
Right. And aid.
An aid.
It
Yeah.
becomes your buddy, right? That's your buddy. And so when you see the logo for the bot, he's so cute. I worked with a graphic designer and a teammate to do this, but he's blue and green and he's got a red heart in the center because he becomes your buddy. That's the whole idea, is that people feel supported, because people do not feel supported right now. And especially right now in the climate that we're in, I'm not going to get political, don't worry. But the fact that there's a high intensity of mental health right now, we work in mental health all day, every day through Affinity Patient Advocacy. I can't tell you how many long hauler COVID patients have come to me that do not have the support. So we're scrambling to get the patient portal up right now for the telemonitoring for Spectral. That's the last piece, and it's ready to go live because I'm going to put all my patients from the nonprofit over there. So all these other nonprofits out there, NAMI, et cetera, could then influx into us patients so we can help guide these patients through the process, and everybody can see the data from now on. The doctors will know what's going on. If you have multiple doctors, they're not paying attention. If you have cancer, like we'll pick on my dad, right? He had cancer all over his body. So he had a pulmonologist, he had a GI doc, he had his GP, his general practitioner, he had his oncologist, he had his hepatologist because he had liver cancer. Okay, that's just 5 people that I can count off the top of my head. And this was back in 15. 5 people. They're not talking to each other. He had a drug-drug interaction because he had cognitive issues. My father used to negotiate contracts for the turnpike, against the turnpike, for the people, the Teamsters. Hundreds of pages right here. All memory. He did not write anything down on a piece of paper. Nothing was ever written down. He was brilliant. He didn't even go to college. He was blue collar, diploma only. So when I saw that he wasn't processing, I knew something was wrong. And I said, what's going on? Have you checked to make sure it didn't metastasize to his brain now? Because it's everywhere. When's the last time he had an MRI? Then I started looking at his drugs. Now remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a PhD. I'm none of those things. I'm just a clinical research person, I turned into that. I'm a business person, I'm reading his chart and I see that there's one drug that causes cognitive inability with the other drug he's on. Nobody was paying attention. It's, and I'm not being critical, and we didn't sue anybody or anything crazy, but I'm telling you, these experiences for me were eye-opening to the point where I was like, that's enough. We can do better. So then when COVID hit and everything got turned upside down, and we're working on this COVID treatment with the FDA. We were one of the companies that got hacked by the Chinese government, by the way. My submission was hacked in the FDA portal. That big press release that went out? That was a true story. I was one of them. So that was a very stressful time. So we're trying to work through all this. and the US and everything, and then extra US people. And we just started putting our heads down and building the system out because we knew patients needed help. It's enough. We've had enough. It's time to give it back.
It's incredible. Now, the other thing I want to ask about is so the patches. I've heard of some things, not obviously for cannabis and CBD, but they have it for like vitamins where they could take some sort of blood sample and things like that and see what vitamin deficiencies and things like that you have. So I know you're saying that you have some pre-manufactured patches for certain problems and disabilities like ADHD and things like that. So is it both where you can take a test, find out, what is a perfect match for you and then get the patch made? Or do you have some off the shelf
Yes.
version as well?
No, that's your winner chicken dinner.
Yeah.
Right there. Which is, we do have off the shelf, right? So we have, just like I said, we have the CBD patches for full broad isolate. We have magnesium patches with gold nanoparticles for pain. We have B12 patches, D patches, melatonin patches. So we have a whole nutraceutical line called AVM, AVM therapy and AVM lifestyle. You're probably like, why are they two different? It's because of the way you have to process payments. One has CBD and one does not. So the therapy side obviously is the CBD patch side. The other side, the lifestyle side, has all the other patches, but you can buy them on both websites. But what we're doing is we started formulating for disease states. So Spectral's goals right now are to come out strong and hard with mental health, as well as women's health, for obvious reasons. I'm a CEO and I'm a woman, and I've had hormonal issues. I suffered from postpartum longer because I had complications with my son's birth, and he was in the NICU at CHOP for 35 days, and I went home without my baby, and I didn't hold him for 4 days. So that was kind of tough. So I've suffered, through postpartum. I've had massive hormonal changes from having my son, but then Hashimoto has hormone and fibro. They're both hormonal based diseases, right? So it's all based on hormones. So as a patient, I'm seeing all kinds of things. So although it's annoying that I have these things, it's helped me be better at my job. I know this might sound goofy to people, but really it does. So we have the ADHD patch that I disclosed that we've pumped out, and we're seeing efficacy. We have to do continued research though. This was just an observational. Then we have the immune boost patch that we pushed because obviously immune problems, but for palliative support for cancer patients, as well as the COVID long haulers. So remember I said earlier, I've been helping all these long hauler patients. I got 3 more today at APA that came in my email box that need help. They're using all of our products. I've been helping them with the gold nanoparticles, for example, the immune boost patch. We're going to be working on a 510 application for an inhalation device where I can take my formulations that I put in patches, put them in carts, and from a rescue standpoint, fire off the meds to these patients and collect the data back into the spectral telemonitoring system. So now we know when you're hitting the device, we know for how long, how often, and remember the watch? These people will be wearing their watch. So the bot will say to them, when there's an issue, if they're firing up too much, the bot will start trying to calm them down to figure out what's going on. So I know it's crazy. It's all over the place.
Well,
but
I mean, it's all. I see it all in the goal of capturing the most data possible. You're taking every angle and getting all the data.
Yes.
So in the perfect scenario, which everything is working out great, you're collecting all the data that you need. People are using the inhaler. They're wearing the watch. They're wearing the patches. They're doing everything. They're doing the blood tests. That's a lot of data. At the end of the day, with that data, what's the light at the end of the tunnel? What can we do once we get all this data?
So this is what we can do. First off, we will never sell the data. We have people now, because we're raising a second round, because everything that we've put into Spectral right now has been self-funded, right? So that's our seed. So our second round, we're raising not for the telemonitoring, but to do the studies, to use the telemonitoring system. The goal is to be able to show data sets to the FDA so that the FDA understands this better. Because right now, they view it as a biologic, right? This is a plant. It's a nutraceutical. And there has to be provisions around how to make the product, obviously, GMP and all the things we normally do in biotech land. However, we need to show them the data. We need to show them that it's titrating properly in the kidneys and the liver, and it's not getting stuck in the GI tract like Epidiolex was, by the way. It was getting stuck. That's why it took so long. So, so we've got to show proof, right? Because if we want this to be covered by insurance at the end of the day, which is what we want, right? This is medicine. This isn't a recreational product. This isn't something you're using a bung or something for. This is a medical product. Why can't it be, paid for through your insurance? So that's part of it. The other part of it is to mine the data to see what trends I'm seeing across these patient profiles with all these different disease states to see if I find something, a cherry in the pile of something that we could go for to help more patients. That's the design, is to continuously help patients round and round and round and round again to support them so they feel better, so that they have the best quality of life they can possibly have. I can tell you, being on set for 4 days with my problems that and then I started allergy shots like 4 weeks ago, and I'm in Florida, and God, my face was, it was horrible. I learned that now I have to travel with prednisone because I swell up like a balloon, like horrible balloon, and I'm exhausted and I'm in pain. And that's just from being on set for 4 days.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I just even just hearing today, there's a lot of high-powered people that are just kind of touting that like there's no actual evidence that cannabis does anything for people. And I think with what you're doing and the process that you're doing everything the right way, doing everything the medical way with research, there's going to be a point that no one can say that. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. It's not been easy. I've got people that are watching me very closely because I'm watching them watch me, because they're watching me move and they're trying to figure out if I'm going to be a threat to their pipeline. Because I'm designing the first head-to-head. I've designed the first head-to-head pharmaceutical study against cannabis. I'm waiting for the IRB to give me the final approval, and I'm coming out the gates with that study. And when I do, and this product shows to be efficacious, phone's going to be ringing, because now what? Now we're in the same playing field with you.
That's the problem.
Nobody else has done
too much money that's made in pharmaceuticals, and if a plant can do something more than $1 billion worth of research with chemicals and all this technology that they're doing, yeah, there's definitely going to be some people that are being afraid of you, for sure.
Well, look at that, and look at the Alzheimer's drug that just got approved. I don't know if you saw it.
The one that
it's not cannabis.
They don't know if it works or not. That one.
It came. Doesn't work. Yeah. And you know how much money that costs a year? $56,000. And you know how that happened? Because it's an unmet medical need. There's not a lot out there for Alzheimer's.
Right.
So they got into that class. So they were smart. They got into the class, but they had design flaws.
Yeah, it's a problem. But yeah, it looks like yeah.
Sure.
I'm hoping. Yeah, they'll once we have solid papers that are accepted with all the efficacy and the actual results, things are going to change. They're going to change for the better, for sure. Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on to the show. It was great having you. Is there any final words? Well, actually, before we end it, for all these things, I know we kind of talked about a lot of different websites, but where should somebody who's listening want to, like, if they want to get started with any of this, so with the bot or the watch or the patches, like where should they start to try to kind of find the most information?
Well, what I did was I launched a personal brand last July. I always do that with the J's. I'll say June or January when I mean to say whatever. Last July, I launched the I Am Christina DiArcangelo brand. And one of the facets of the brand is obviously for patient, right? Patient empowerment, patient voice, but also the professional side of Christina DiArcangelo, which is this other side we were talking about today, the tech side, the CRO side, the biotech formulation side of the business. So I think just if they just go on, if they just type in ChristinaDiArcangelo.com,
Gotcha. Perfect.
they find me. I'm right there.
Right.
Because I have so many companies, so many websites. I mean, God. And LinkedIn, Instagram, I am Christina DiArcangelo. I do read and answer all of my DMs myself. I have a PR team, but I do that myself because I have patients that come to me, obviously, and that's proprietary. And I take that very seriously. And if a client comes to me, it's confidential information. Not that my team would ever say anything, but I don't want them to be worried that somebody's reading something they shouldn't. You know what I'm saying? So those are the best places to find me.
So yeah, everybody visit that site. I want to thank you for your time, and I know your time is precious. You're super busy, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing to just try to better patient care and better the lifestyle of people. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing, and I really am hoping to catch you on that show once it comes out. I'll be looking out for it. It sounds super interesting. And everybody else listening too, I don't think you want to miss it. So go check that out when it comes out. Well, we'll definitely put a link out when it does come out to remind everybody.
Thank you. And we'll share it. I'll make sure Mike reaches out to you when it airs, because we're going to, I can't wait to see what happens and see how it all comes together. And you know what? As a result of this, we decided to do our own documentary on my life because you
have so much extra time on your hands. Yeah, absolutely.
I write it at night when I'm laying in bed on my phone. That's what I do. Because, as an entrepreneur, what do? Your brain goes, right? I'm highly functioning the ADHD. I've taken it to the max. Yeah. But thank you so much for inviting me on, Jason. It was a pleasure being a guest today. And I will definitely make sure we give you everything we have going on that you might want to share that could be helpful to your readers and your viewers.
They're going to want to learn a lot about what you have to say. So we'll definitely have that out there. Thanks again. All right. Once again, I want to thank Christina DiArcangelo for coming on to the show. And for all your cannabis news and for other podcasts like this one, visit us at www.trichomes.com, or you can check us out on the TRICHOMES community app. If you want to reach out to the show, email us at techandcannabis@trichomes.com. I'm Jason Kitamura, and thanks for joining us.